Well, hello. We are going live.
Yeah.
Hello,
I'm glad
everyone.
you're here to manage all of that stuff because I have no idea what you're doing. Like if
So,
if I ever have to actually run the live stream,
if you had to run it, I hope that every time I do it correctly. So I do keep like the LinkedIn piece open on another monitor just to like make sure I
just to
see it
validate,
actually
yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Because even though we're on this platform, which in theory does, function, I want
Yeah.
to make sure that it is working. You know,
Yeah.
that is
Validation, testing, yeah.
all
So what
of
are we
those
here to
things.
talk about today?
How live streaming works, right? No,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
that's not what we're doing. Yeah, so we're here, we're back again, and we are on our fourth part of our journey. So we are talking about enabling today. So last time we did talk about selling, which I find a little bit uncomfortable, but we are past the selling. We are past the point of someone being like, okay, I like the idea of the platform. I would like to adopt it. I am on board with the idea. So now we
And I'm
get to the
assigning
part.
someone to it. And this is
Yeah.
their name and this is their team. And
Yeah.
how do they get started?
How do they get started? So we send them the get started documentation,
Yeah.
right? That's what
Here's the
happens.
page. Here's the homepage for the platform.
Yeah,
And
it's a
good
wiki
luck.
page, maybe, or a README, something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe I got a Slack channel, something like that. And then
Maybe.
maybe I did something like that,
Probably a Teams channel.
depending on where I work. Um, pro- do some people use Discord professionally? I don't know.
I think unless you're a crypto startup, probably not.
Or an AI startup, maybe.
Or an AI startup, yes.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone. I think see we have some people joining live, especially on LinkedIn. We have a few live viewers. So if you want to say hi, say where you're joining from. Lovely to have you here. I'm based on the East Coast here in Georgia. My name is Erica Huberg. It does say here on the screen, but lovely to have you joining live. So if you want to pop a comment, say hi, where you're joining from. It's lovely to have you here. And
And
well,
I'm
do you
Dave.
want to? Yeah.
I live in Jackson Heights in New York City and also on the East Coast. So we've got coincident time zones. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the chat today. It's sort of like this part of this cycle of getting adoption for your platform and keeping it there, right?
Yes, hopefully you keep the adoption. And it is lunchtime here on the East Coast. So if you are joining, eating your lunch while you're hanging out with us, that is absolutely lovely. So it's great to have you here. This time I have prepared so that we have our little slides, or what we want to call it, from London KubeCon Platform Engineering Day talk. So that can help us a little bit talk about enabling. So if you haven't been here for the other little chats we've had over the weeks, we talked about getting to know the market, which was getting to know the organization and who's in the market for your internal platform. We talked about marketing the internal platform, and we talked about selling it. And now we're talking about enabling those adopters. So the delivery, as we were talking about, yeah, we sent them that getting started page. We
Yeah.
invited them.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah,
It's all self-service, right? You just look at the README file and then start filling in all of these YAML or JSON or XML, files, and it's all really self-explanatory, you know.
of course. Yeah,
And and then it just picks it up and it builds it and then it just works.
absolutely.
Unless it doesn't.
Unless it doesn't. And I think, like, for me, it's always been, I mean, you and I talked about this earlier. I was thinking back to those experiences where either I was starting early in my career or when I've joined a new company, and it's feeling a bit I can feel a bit dumb sometimes asking questions.
Hmm.
And however rationally I can tell myself that it's not dumb, right? If
Yep.
I can't find the information, right, it's not my
Yeah,
fault, right?
assuming the assumption by the organization is that you're smart and you'll figure it out, and of course everyone falls short of that, but when they do, they have this like sort of imposter syndrome thing immediately thrust on them that like, am I stupid? Like, is this really this difficult to figure out, or am I not getting it? And that's one of the things you don't want to happen with a new customer of anything, right? You don't
Yeah.
want them to decide to buy your thing and then have it be difficult to use or figure out, or really have any question that gets them out of the flow of using your platform, which is what, you know,
Yeah.
that we're supposed to improve their lives, and if we put big barriers in front, it
Yeah.
doesn't happen, right?
And I think what is a bit different, right, when you maybe have purchased a product like a customer, if I paid money, like Dave, if I was like, oh, Dave, I'm going to give you money for a product, I can almost feel like I have an entitlement to be like, Dave, I want you to explain to me how on earth to use this.
Hmm.
But especially if I'm maybe new to an organization, or like, I feel like
Or
I
new to
need
the
to work.
or
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think I lost your audio there a little bit. Um, I don't know what happened, but if I'm new to an organization, I feel like I
I'm
need
back.
to okay, yeah. If I'm new to a company or an organization, or I feel like I need to be smart, right? I need to work it out, and that can be really tricky. I have that need, almost like I want to prove myself.
Hmm.
I don't feel like I can be like, "Oh, Dave, you need to explain this to me," or like someone on your team or whatever.
Yeah,
It is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the dynamic becomes different because I didn't like pay you for it. I don't know
You're
why it is.
investing you're investing in it, but yes, you didn't pay for it in the traditional sense that, a customer does. So, in order to get around some of these things, there's some fairly standard patterns, right, that you can follow in order to break down some of these like very typical um, sort of friction points that happen, right? New people or in an org, but also new people to a platform.
Yeah,
And so we called it enablement. I mean, one of
yeah,
the easiest ways to make sure that people have an easy time getting onto your platform is to enable them. And that's that was this fourth thing. And it's kind of split, like you're showing, into onboarding and supporting. Both of them are a form of support or enabling. And yeah, you want to make the experience, we've been trying to make the experience great from, the start of the contact, marketing,
yeah,
getting to know them, doing the sales, all of this in a way that, these potential customers of your platform actually enjoy, right?
yeah,
Which is, we felt like that was some of the hardest stuff in selling. But then you get to the onboarding and they need to continue to enjoy it. Like now that you got them, right? You can't give them something that, because remember, they're investing their time. If it's not worth their time, it's very easy to stop investing time. Like if
yeah,
you've bought something, you can have this sort of sunk cost fallacy associated with it, right? And say, I invested all this, I bought this thing, it's expensive, I put this time into it, I've got to use it. But even then, people would maybe just return it, say it's not worth my time, like not worth the investment I made. And if you're investing time in something that's not paying back, you stop doing it, right? Because that's the only payment you're
or
making.
you may be
Yeah.
stuck using it, but you're gonna go start telling your friends that it's not worth
Yeah.
using it.
Yeah.
You
You
might
get
be stuck with it, but you're gonna
negative
start telling
promotion,
other
right?
people that, "Okay, I'm stuck, but I wanna make sure you don't get stuck with it."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's happened all over the place, right? I mean, who hasn't been someplace where said, stay away from that system or team or whatever. Like
That
once you get
thing.
on that thing, it's so broken. They're
You're never going to get out of
they're
it.
Docker containers with hard-coded URLs inside of them, and IP address, and like, and you hear about these nightmare platforms that like people don't want to be on. So
yeah, like we have this so
yeah,
cute.
first step is keeping them happy during the onboarding process. So you need more than docs, right?
Yeah, I have this dream though, Dave, that maybe AI is going to save me sometimes. I have this dream that I'm going to get AI to like answer all the questions for all the people.
It can help, but it's an
I
internal
know it's a bit of a
thing.
joke. I have this dream
Well,
that
but
one day.
I think it will actually play out that way, and there will be a lot of value in having chatbots, agents helping with the platform. But we've made this such a personalized process and hands-on, and these are people who know where we live, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to have it be so distant, right? And we've got to play this balance in onboarding of making it as self-service as possible. As a successful platform needs to enable people without having other people getting in their way, right? But at the same
Yeah.
time, big companies, big complex systems, they're not always like incredibly straightforward to work with.
Yeah.
And so you got to do this enablement. And right, there's a few different forms it could take. So you can have but there's almost some like standard approaches to that in the industry, and we've been talking all along about how we can reuse so many different concepts. So you work in a product company, right?
Yeah.
What do you do after the sale? There's like an actual team, right?
Yeah. There's a customer success team and like field engineering, right? People who literal job is to make sure that customers are successful, who they often are, they are often engaged actually pre-sales. They are engaged to understand what the goals of, not often, they are engaged pre-sales
Yeah,
before
they have
this.
to be. If you sell something that can't be supported, like, sometimes that works in big enterprise sales. Like the salesperson comes along, they sell the executives buy in, and then everyone's stuck with implementing, and they hate it, and you get, negative adoption and word of mouth from actual implementers. But, in the internal sense, right? You can't, you went in, you're the leader of the platform. You close the sale. You can't just walk away and hope it works out and someone else can take care of it. So yeah, of course, you need to have the people who are going to create the success involved up front, and you need to follow through.
Yeah. And then you make sure that you partner throughout, like to that initial success milestone. I think, from like my experience now being like on the outside, if you will, like in not being so up in my career, my first more than 10 years of my career was very much not in the vendor space, right? I was in the building software in the enterprise world, and then being in internal platforms. But now being over the last year being in a vendor company, seeing this, working with clients in a different way, seeing like working with, it's very similar actually. It's incredibly similar to how when I was leading a platform team, that I would work with internal stakeholders and see through their milestones and success milestones is very similar to how we would work with now, where
Absolutely,
I work
right.
now, with how we work with our clients' milestones to understand, like, okay, where are you? I have obviously less transparency. I don't have all the details in the same way I would have
You're
had
held
in an
at arm's
internal.
length, right? There's only so far in you can get.
Yes, but at the same time, you try to make sure that your product, when you work as a vendor, that your product has the features, you understand where they're going, it has what they need to be successful for their milestones, right? I just don't have
and
all of the other dependency insight into their entire company as I would have when I worked in an internal.
exactly.
platform, right?
You don't know everything about the strategy and the business
Yeah,
internally. So, but at the same, at the same time, it's this whole platform as a product approach, right? And the fact that you're treating your users as customers gives a huge amount of crossover between your prior life of being internal and now your current life of being external. They're
yeah,
still customers. And so you've taken that customer centric mindset over between the two spaces. It's very related.
yeah,
Maybe you have more limited access to information and impact, right? External external vendors, consultants, everyone, they're trusted to say things, and their word and their opinions are trusted, but they're not trusted to do things, right? And so
yeah,
you often find yourself having to partner with internal people. And you know what? This happens internally too,
yeah,
because as an authority on things, you might be trusted to say that this should be the direction platform wise, cloud or whatever. But, a manager who's committing to this thing, they trust their team, right?
mm,
And so you
yeah,
have to do the same kind of partnership with the team in order to make them successful. And it's still all really, really tied up. And so I think one of the things we're getting at here is you need to have a function as part of a platform team that is focused on the customer success. And it could be a process, it could be an actual role. There larger companies have actual roles for developer enablement. Um, or it could just be part of how you handle, the onboarding. Like, oh, we've
yeah,
got a queue of customers coming on, and we're going to walk them through the process. We'll have a process for them to go through to get on the platform, bootstrap themselves, answer any questions. And it'll have all these standard steps. And, some customers can skip them, right? Because
yeah,
they get it, they're entirely up to speed, and they just need to, fill out a web page and get their app. And then others, they haven't done this stuff before, and they need a different level of help. And so you kind of have that all accounted for.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm also really curious if anyone of those listening in live has any tips or ideas that they have used. So feel free to drop a comment if you have any like onboarding advice that you have, or if you have any questions for Dave and I as we are chatting. Don't hesitate to drop those questions in live
Absolutely.
as we are chatting. So
Or in the comments after we post this.
yeah, we're happy to come back and answer them as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, as we talk about enabling, Dave, I did think about that actually just this week. So I'm involved in open source projects a lot, right? As well, so
Hmm.
I'm involved in the Envoy Gateway community, and in our we have. By the way, I'm not saying this at all to promote my open source stuff, but we were chatting today, this week I just actually did a little dot connecting in my head because we have in the Envoy Gateway end user meetings, we have actually realized now we have some users who are at just adopting stage, and we
Hmm.
have some users who are more advanced and are adopting new features. And, we talk about enablement. So those are two different categories of enablement, but that is an
Yeah.
interesting challenge as well, by the way,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. I like
enablement
how, yeah.
cycle.
And
Um,
it's also it also plays into it's a feedback loop into what your platform needs to be versus what you thought the customer base was, right? So you're trying to know your market and everything for the marketing and then the sales, but then you get to the actual implementers, and sometimes you have to tune what your onboarding experience is like, right? So this enablement team or this process needs to be tied into how the platform is developed, because you have people come through the onboarding process and their experience needs to be very carefully, especially the early, like first 10 customers or so on a
yeah,
platform. They should have a huge impact on like what you do for that onboarding process to make sure that it goes more and more smoothly for the people that follow them.
yeah,
So, there's this constant feedback, which is nice if you can have the same team and have it be a process and everyone sort of rotate through this kind of enablement, which is a form of support, which we'll talk about next,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but it was
But yeah,
kind of on support. Yeah, let's talk about it. But yeah, the feedback is so important, like that loop of feedback on what people are going through. And sometimes it's a bit painful to get that feedback though, Dave. Like,
yeah, like, oh, I had to, it was all so automated, but then I had to, babysit the production deployment and just keep clicking, right?
I've gotten some painful feedback in my life, and it's like painful. Also, sometimes you get feedback, but you don't know how to solve it. You get feedback that something is bad, but you also don't have an idea of how to make it better. That is
Mhm.
tough to
Yeah.
handle.
Yeah, and it the other default that happens when you get feedback when you've built something is that you must be using it wrong. Or, it's like, that's not what I intended, so therefore that can't be what's happening.
Mm,
And, there's also this kind of ego thing that can get in the way of taking the feedback. And one of the nice ways to deal with that is to have a good structured kind of product oriented interview process
mm,
and ask people questions like, instead of just asking for blanket feedback, like walk them through, like, what was your experience like? What
mm.
would what surprised you? What went better than you expected? What didn't go as well as and give them the ability to kind of spool out much more specific things than I
Yeah.
really hated this part or,
Yeah.
uh, I really expected better from that or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's,
How 'Cause, actually, before we move on, like, I am actually curious how, because 'cause I've had that feeling more than once in my career where you get this, "Oh, that doesn't work well." And I
mhm.
feel, "Okay, I obviously want it to work well." And sometimes that means, well,
Well, sometimes you get the feedback
what
in the
can I do with
moment.
that? I want to make it better, but and now what would your advice
Digging
be at that
so
moment?
the tough thing in a lot of those feedback situations is that you're not sitting in the scenario, you're hearing about
Yeah.
it,
Yes,
and you don't
exactly.
have all the
And sometimes
context.
it's even secondhand, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's the worst, right? Like, "Oh, my people said that this is terrible," right?
Yeah,
Like,
like the
what is that?
manager or a team comes back to you and like,
Yeah,
they don't like it. They say it's bad, and you're like,
yeah. How? Why? And so the kind of the solution to this, because this becomes anxiety, right? Because it's like
yeah,
something is wrong, but don't know what to do about. And the easiest way to actually do something about it is to say, all right, let's walk through this. Like, you have a problem. Let's set up a session. As long as they're willing, right?
yeah,
Hopefully you've kept people just happy enough that they're willing to sit down with you and work through the problem together and
yeah,
collaborate on figuring out what's wrong. So if it's secondhand, like, all right, put me in touch with these people and let me do the interview with them, or just sit down with them and review the actual problem. Like, show me what you're experiencing. And that's
yeah,
important. Like, if you get the experience as they experience it, it should help you figure out, like, oh, there's a difference between what I intended and what they're experiencing, right?
yeah. Or
And you'll
maybe
know
they're
exactly
using
what
it
it
the
is.
way I intended, and it is a bad experience, and that's okay, and we can
Yeah,
make it better. 'Cause
yeah.
that can be tough, right? Because I think most of us want it to be a good experience, and it
Mhm.
can. And, as you were saying this, I think this is tricky, right? They get feedback. Like, when do we get feedback? And I think getting feedback as early as possible so we don't end up in that experience that I've had in my career, where you especially get the secondhand, almost too late
Yeah,
feedback,
yeah, yeah.
right? That is a tough one. Like,
So
and
part
you
of
feel
your
helpless.
onboarding, if you have a process, so if you have a queue of incoming customers and it becomes part of your workflow, agile, or whatever, that there's a sprint, we're gonna bring this customer on in this sprint or maybe couple sprints, and you walk them through a process of, training, for instance, right? How, like, we'll give you the docs, but then we'll also do sessions with you. We'll pair
Mm.
program on getting this set up if you don't feel confident in doing it yourself. There's all these different steps and check-ins you can have, and the very last step in the process should be an interview for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And you don't just say, how was it, right, in some sort of informal way over email. You actually sit down with them and you take the time to hear how their experience went, and let them know they've been heard, and that you understand that there might be improvements you need to make. And if
Mm.
you keep doing that and staying in that habit, you'll just be making the platform better and better. But it has to be a conscious, intentional thing.
Yeah. And this reminds me especially of some of these things that a customer success leader that I know highlights. He is very intentional as well that when he goes through onboarding with a client, he's very upfront about like how this feedback loop is going to work.
Hmm.
That there is a feedback loop that's going to happen, and how often it's going to happen, and where those touch points are going to be. So it's not like, oh, by the way, we're going to do feedback now. Like,
Yeah, and it's not that sometimes unhelpful, let me know if you need help type thing,
yeah,
right? Because that creates a little bit of a barrier, whether you intend to or not. Whereas if you create those specific touch points to reach out to the customer and say, where are you in the process? What has been a specific stumbling block? So don't tell them to say, what do you need from me? Walk through where they are and figure out how you can help them, right? And
yeah,
that's enablement, right? That's not sitting waiting for a call.
yeah. And I think this is where there's a slight difference between reactive support and proactive enablement. Like,
Hmm. Yeah.
support can be and is reactive, but
Hmm.
support can be proactive, and that's when it turns into enablement, I guess,
Yeah.
right?
Or just really good support, right? Like knowing there are problems before, well, we get into support. I think
Yeah,
I think once we've taken the once we've done the sort of interview at the end of the onboarding process, they're now a customer on the platform. They've got
yeah,
something running in prod, and they're doing regular deploys or whatever your platform does, right?
yeah,
And now you need to continue to make them happy, right?
yeah,
So you kept them happy with how you worked with them on the onboarding. And now as they use the system, they need to continue to be happy with being, day-to-day users of the system.
yeah,
And that's the support. And so to go back to your point about, proactive, um, there's a lot of, so a platform is many things, but one of the most important things that it is a runtime place for your app to run.
yeah,
So, we're not talking about just the CI/CD or something that's like the build or something. We're talking about your app running somewhere. And
something is
so
live.
exactly. And if that is having any form of trouble, you really wanna be aware of that before your customers. So, we've been, the whole field of observability has been developing for a long time, and there's not as much reason anymore. Like when I participated in the first .com bubble,
Mm,
we'd frequently have, customers or the CEO tell us, oh, the site is down, or the streams are down for our video
yeah,
streaming or something. That's largely avoidable these days,
yeah,
right? And so, one of the very first things you need to do is in your support, be proactive and
yeah,
establish what does a good experience on the platform look like? Establish what the service level objective of the platform
yeah,
is, or multiple, and then review that and make sure that you're within that. And that's your first step in saying, well, we support users by making sure that our platform is up to the standards that we expect. And
yeah,
therefore, they shouldn't have to tell us that builds are failing or apps are dying or things like that.
Or like and how things are performing on a like
Exactly.
ongoing basis. I think it's a really interesting topic overall, right? Like day two operations generally. As a platform team, I was speaking to a friend recently who is in the platform space, and we were talking about day two operations.
Hmm.
And we were talking about how often it's so easy to go through this process of the sort of the deployment, the setup,
Hmm.
the
The
you know,
bootstrap, right? It's so fun
yeah,
to do the creation of the thing, but the
yeah,
ongoing care and feeding of
operation.
the thing
Yeah,
is not as exciting to everyone. There are
yeah,
people who are better suited to that kind of, perspective and mode of working,
yeah.
right?
And he has more industry experience than me, this friend, and we were talking about it, and he was saying that as as you live through many,
Mhm.
production systems, you start to have a great appreciation of the importance of data operations and identifying issues and drilling down into where the problem is. And
Mhm.
if you can spot that something's going to be unhealthy, like the symptoms before the crash, obviously that is
Yeah.
fantastic. But if you can also the more quickly you can find the root cause when an issue happened, the better, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really interesting thing as well. Like whether that whether that is with your runtime environment or whether that is it could also be with your deployment pipelines,
Well,
right?
you're well, and this is an important distinction we probably should be
Yeah,
explicit about. Your platform, all parts of it, the pipelines, the dev environments, the production
yeah,
environment are all production for
yeah,
you, right?
because people are
And if any
using
part
them to do their
exactly,
job.
exactly. It doesn't matter that the app is up in production if that's great, but if people can't develop features or they can't roll out a fix to the app in
Yeah,
production, then you essentially have a production outage, which might seem counterintuitive in a dev environment. And that's
yeah,
one of the things that when you're supporting other people, what they depend on becomes production for
yeah,
somebody, right?
yes,
So it is really important when you have that customer review. Now, the other thing I think sometimes gets left out is doing operations for the platform is for the platform, not the apps on top.
mm,
One of the sort of anti-patterns that sometimes happens is that, people launch something on the platform and then they feel like, okay, so you'll support it now, right? We built it, we deployed it, and then like you're the ops? No. And that's a clear set of boundaries you need to have when you set
yeah,
up the sort of service level agreement between you and the customer. Is like, we make sure that apps can run, we make sure they can build, deploy, like these are the
yeah.
things that we're responsible for. We
And
will make sure.
if you have a runtime platform, making sure that I've been responsible in my career where there has been there've been, application platforms
Mhm.
and being very clear on this is the application platform, this is your application.
Mhm.
This is how you understand if the application platform is healthy. This is how you n- thi-
This is how
this
you
is
know that you're using the database wrong in your code, and we
like
can't
yeah,
fix that for you.
like
You know?
this is where the boundary is. This is how
Yep.
you validate that what my team owns is functioning correctly. And however, though, as a platform team, that was quite hard. And me and my
Because
team, we
it's
spent
a
a
lot of
lot of time.
leftover Yeah, a lot of leftover culture, I think, of, the very, prior to DevOps and even after DevOps, when some things kind of broke down, when the DevOps team just became a new word for the production operations team, right? And it's very difficult sometimes for people to even buy into that model, right? That split. But it is I think the continuation of DevOps that if you have those very clear interfaces between the dev team's application and the platform itself, then the dev team can do their DevOps and focus on their app for the ops,
Yeah.
right? They can say, I'm delivering the business, service levels that I expect to. I'm processing transactions, users are happy,
Yeah.
our actual customers, and you can focus on that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to worry, DevOps when it started out was like, well, they also had to worry about patching and infrastructure and,
Yeah.
security stuff. And we're taking that away, but we're doing it in such a way as like, okay, you're the front line for your app. We're the front
Yeah.
line for the platform your app runs on, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very necessary and clear division of duties you have to establish. It's sort of like when they say for security and operation, it's the cloud providers call a shared responsibility model, right?
Yeah.
In order for the company to deliver, the experience for its customers, you have a
Yeah.
shared responsibility between the application teams and the platform
Yeah.
teams.
And I just also thought about the funny part where you have the build pipelines. I mean, I am sure there are many people in the platform engineering world who have had an application team tell the platform team that the build system or the build pipelines are broken, to find that the application code is broken and cannot build.
Yep.
The build system and the build pipelines are perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It's the application code that is broken and cannot build.
Yeah. And that's sometimes what I remember this as. It can be a tough situation, especially in the past, when there was so much dependency between the application builds and the build platform. Before containers and everything. It's like, does your Jenkins have all the dependencies that I need? Did you do an upgrade? Like, that world was much tougher in the past than I think it is now, fortunately. But that's another division of labor that needs to be there, right? So, and we talked about service levels before and service level objectives. One of your keys to understanding whether or not you have a problem is, do I builds executing? Do I builds, going through the system? And if you see that drop and someone comes to you and says there's a problem with the build, that means one thing, which is like, okay, you should have been looking at that before they came to you, right? Then suddenly you're supposed to have like 100 builds an hour and suddenly you only have like 5. And that's probably bad news. But if you have 99 builds an hour and one of the builds comes to you and says, I've got a problem, it's likely more to be, in their code, right?
Yeah, not as platform.
But you can help them. You can help them and help them diagnose, because you want to be a good partner, right? And sometimes teams aren't as skilled at dealing with build systems, right? When they, or their own build, like some software has incredibly complicated builds. And again, you're there to enable them, right?
And sometimes it's all about this whole, I think we talked about this before, the 80-20 situation, right? You can't cater to every little edge case of your customers, right? You may be operating in an organization where your 80% are incredibly highly skilled technical people. So maybe your build system and your build platform is actually catered to quite technically knowledgeable people. And you have a small set of your engineering population who needs a little bit more hand-holding, and maybe that was
sort
one
of a
them.
reverse 80-20 situation, right?
Maybe you do. Like, I don't say that those organizations don't exist. So then maybe you spend a little bit of time here and there hand-holding
Yeah.
a small percentage of your organization to just make sure they're successful. Like that can happen, right? And you may make that call instead of abstracting away a bunch of things. You just handhold a particular
Yeah.
team every
Yeah.
now and then when things go a little bit wrong, and that might be what you choose to do, and that's okay, right? That's okay.
Yeah.
So it could be that situation.
One of the things I think that I've heard is almost like an anti-pattern is when teams are engaged in this kind of support of users, they sometimes feel trapped in that they are doing too much ops work and therefore they can't do their work, right? They can't
Mm,
develop the platform or whatever. And to me, that always it's a form of code smell in a way. Like your platform is not enabled. Like, so people use your platform to get their work done.
yeah.
If they're coming to you for help, that means they're not getting their work done, which means you're not doing your work. You may want to
Mm,
work on new features, but if your platform isn't supporting people with its existing features, then you've got a problem. And so the support, the flow of support and issues is a feedback loop, right?
yeah.
And if you're not taking care of that and you're the scope of your support work and you're starting to think about, well, okay, how can I dedicate people? Like maybe I need to spawn off
Yeah.
a team to do that's going to be
Mm,
a bigger and bigger problem because it sounds like you're not managing your platform as a product that's there to,
yeah.
to help all the users. You're
Yeah.
churning out features and
You know,
maybe just focused on the wrong things.
you know what's super interesting about this? So in customer success, so this customer success leader that I know, there, I actually had a quite in-depth conversation with this
Hmm.
person quite recently, and he shared with me that if you have a client who raises 0 support tickets with you, that is a concerning situation.
Mm-hmm.
You are actually worried about that. You want them to be raising support tickets
Yeah.
because that means that they are using your system.
Yeah, how if they're not engaging with the system, they're not finding anything. I mean, rarely is the system so perfect that nobody finds a problem with it, right?
Yeah.
So if
So,
they're not finding problems, they might not be using it, and they might not
mm,
renew, you know,
yeah.
as an
So,
external or as an internal, right? They're not becoming proponents of your platform,
yeah.
right?
So, therefore, maybe we should be more looking at these people who are having problems as a positive signal. Like, we should actually appreciate their engagement with us.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
just so you know how you said that, oh, this is like, oh, maybe we need this and that, and like, oh, it's they're keeping us from doing our job, but actually appreciate this engagement and see it as a positive signal. And that can, since if we're doing this parallels, and that's what we're doing in this Build to Boom series, we're using this as drawing parallels from the external world into internal. I think we need to report differently to our stakeholders internally these metrics,
Mhm.
because we do know that if we sat reporting customer success metrics to our organization, we would report a 0 number on customer tickets, support tickets,
Mhm.
as bad. So we need to actually talk about that for internal platforms in the same way. 0 support issues is a bad metric. That's a
Yeah.
bad number. Yes, 1 tickets, loads of them is bad too. But these low
Yeah, you wanna get
priority,
well, I think that's part of operations is measurement, right?
yeah.
And, one of the things you're going to have to do as part of the measurement is decide what things to measure. So you can have these
Mm,
service level objectives, right? And, I'd say if it might depend on the maturity of a platform too, and how far down the stack it is. If it's a reliable, mature part of the system that people don't necessarily interact with that directly, you
yeah.
might not get a ton of support. If it's so the closer it is to the user, right?
Yes, of
Like
course.
if you're
There's
building a
different types
storage
of platforms.
platform, yeah, exactly. There's this potential stat, especially large companies, right? You have people doing compute, people doing storage, people doing application services. And the closer you get to the user, certainly the more there is. But there's other forms of engagement, right, you can do, which is, we'll get maybe to next time we talk about Loop, but even, like we already discussed, like at the end of onboarding, talk with them. Because you can gauge right there, like if they don't have much to answer, right, they're not actually using it, right? And so I think in some sense, what you're saying is lack of feedback is not a good thing. And the feedback could be trouble, or it could just be interactions where you're going out and actively or proactively trying to get, engagement. And you can, you have to judge whether or not you're getting it. So
So
I don't want people to think, there's some part of me that doesn't want people to think like, oh, we should introduce some bugs so we get some tickets. So
not bugs.
Because it becomes
don't
gameable.
But
because it becomes gameable, right?
Okay, don't game it, please. A good, when we talk about this, maybe don't measure support issues, but it could also be someone coming to you with an idea, something they want from you. It doesn't have to be a problem. It could be, Dave, I have an idea that maybe I have another problem, or not problem, not something that I expect you to have already solved, but I have another thing that I think your team could do. Or like those interactions, touch points, those, I don't know how you can measure that effectively, but I do think no one ever talking to you is probably
So maybe something to talk about with support is channels, right?
Yeah.
What kind of channels can and should you have to be, an internal platform support?
Yes.
Like supporting your internal platform.
And how can you sort of measure that engagement? Like, are people actually engaging with you? Right? Are people engaging with your
because
content,
it could be exactly. Are they coming to Confluence? Are they,
or are everyone ignoring your channel, your content, your AI chatbot?
Are they even, or are you measuring that they're using it, right? Are people interacting with it? Again, it's those SLOs are one measure, but like, are people actually using the interactive parts of your system, or do they set it up and forget it? And is that appropriate or not, right? And the other thing is, for instance, what about non-trouble ticket type interaction? Like people, like you said, people have questions about new things, but what about just chatter in a chat channel, right? That's the other thing, is like, is it just too quiet? Like how many interactions have you had? Not necessarily, having to do with
like
tickets or issues, right? And make sure you have, the other thing is to make sure you have as many opportunities. So you have different channels. You have your ticketing system, you have Slack channels, but maybe you also need like office hours, or lunch and learns, or training opportunity. There's like all these different channels you can have for supporting your customers. And the more of them you have in place, the more different working types you can get. Different people have different ways of working, and if you don't, like if you only offer Slack as a support channel, then maybe you're going to miss out on a certain percentage of your users that don't want or don't like to use Slack.
And there's a couple of like other strategies that I've seen people utilize in organizations where I work. There is the internal advisory board for a platform. This have seen in quite large organizations where people have brought in like key stakeholders, but also what I've seen done quite well is where they have not just brought in managers, they brought in like senior engineers from user teams. Or like key engineer users from those, which I think is kind of nice, where they bring them in and they have like a little advisory board. They bring them in. That's a feedback loop where you get a discussion from people from different teams who are users, and you share
people are
with
actually interact. You don't get that secondhand feedback. You get firsthand feedback. Right.
and they get to talk to each other
Yeah.
from different teams,
Yeah.
and you can get them to complain about your platform with
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah. Especially if you bring them donuts or something, you know?
Yeah, bring them something nice. Yeah. And not if they're gluten intolerant, though. Don't bring them gluten donuts. Are they gluten-free
Yeah.
donuts, Dave?
Gluten, dairy-free,
Are they such
which are not
donuts?
very exciting, but there'll be a few of those, and everyone else can have their wheat and their
Okay,
dairy.
but they exist, those donuts.
They do. They do.
Okay, great. Okay, make sure
Yes,
you get them.
absolutely. Donut
Uh,
Factory, yes. Not
okay,
from
awesome.
You're not gonna get them at Dunkin' Donuts, sadly.
Okay,
I miss my Dunkin' Donuts.
okay. Well, I'm happy there are donut options for you. And then there's the survey. I've seen those. I
Mhm.
mean, I have designed a few in my career. The survey, that's for like real mass feedback for like all the end users.
Yep.
And there's an art to designing a survey, by the way. I should probably write a little blog post about
Yeah,
that, Dave.
yeah,
There is
yeah.
an art. You want it to be easy, snappy, not like leading questions. There's an art to
Yes,
it.
absolutely, and there's also an art to the, what would you say, the frequency of
Mm,
surveys and, and also, something you should put in there is the consistency of the
exactly. You can't
surveys.
change your questions between
Exactly, then
every
you
survey,
have
then
no
it don't
way, yeah,
matter.
you can't trend if you don't have the exact same things. Yeah,
Exactly. That
yeah,
makes you so you have to be careful. That's why you wanna also keep it short and also make your questions simple so you don't
mhm,
get that, "Oh my god, question was very point in time." So that's why I also wanna keep it simple. But yes, supporting this is I always find, Dave, that we keep chatting, and I love chatting because we find all of these things and, we
yep.
actually by the way,
There's so
if
many
you
threads, right?
so many threads, and I do wonder, I do know that we don't script these conversations. They're completely unscripted. Our chats are very much fluid, and,
It's just like when we were getting ready for the talk, right?
yes,
Which is
very
why we
much
wanted
so.
to do this. Like, we'd work on a section of the talk, and for a, what was it, 25-minute talk?
Talk yes.
We would spend about this much time for each section, like, trying to plan
Yes.
it out. So, it's I feel like it's nice to get all of this
S
stuff that we were following up on and wishing we could stuff into,
and there's still
the
so much more.
25-minute talk, right?
And there's still so much more, but we have so many ways of keep diving into this content in written formats and visual formats. So it's I think platform adoption and all the phases of it. There's so much content in that. So I really do enjoy it. But yeah, always be getting feedback. If you didn't see our
Yeah.
talk, I'll probably share the link as well so people can
Yeah,
watch
yeah,
it
or put it
again.
in the comments.
Yes. What's also really fun for those who didn't know, like that talk in London, that version of the talk that we gave on the stage, that's the only time that version of the talk was ever given.
Yeah.
So, that's how we do it. There
Yeah,
is
yeah.
definitely
Off the cuff.
part
We did get
part
a good practice run about a half hour before.
yes, but that was not exactly the same that was
No, it
made on
wasn't.
stage.
Yeah.
It's, all a unique experience every time. So,
Yeah. So you have to check in every time.
yes. No, the recording on YouTube is the same every time you watch it. I checked. It doesn't
Oh, okay.
change.
That's
Yeah,
too bad.
it's too bad. Yeah, we do the same thing every time I play it. It doesn't change. AI will maybe help us with that in the
Yeah,
future.
yeah. Maybe
True.
look more animated, so a little balance on the stage between Erica's, like, acting training and, Dave's just like, "Oh, I need to start moving around more."
I think
Erica's
you look so
really
wise.
engaging
You
physically.
look so wise. You look so
Oh, okay.
wise. Yeah. Here is I'll put it into practice notes. This is how we condensed all of these ideas that we have on how to enable people, right? Go through the experience with people, right? That secondhand feedback you get from someone who said to someone, best way is actually sit down with people and see what they were going through if you get the opportunity. that is, and check in often, make it part of it. Don't do it as an afterthought.
Yeah, make it very intentional, and do it regularly. It's sort of like the, keeping consistent survey, because it is a survey, right? Doing that onboarding interview it's an interview, which is even better than surveys, right? It's qualitative data, but you can keep it in a regular format and script, and then keep the experience positive. The original mistake of any platform team is when someone comes to you with something, it's like, did you read the docs? Or, or our docs, or the docs for a tool that they're expected to use, or something like that. It's just, making sure that, again, if you go through the experience with them and you understand what they're going through, you're probably going to figure out what you need to do to keep it positive. And then, your entire system is production. And that's another thing that people have a tough time dealing with, because you would often have like systems people who are like, well, it's not in prod, so it's a lower priority. It's like, well, that's not so true anymore, right? The dev environment is production for somebody because they're trying to do things, right?
Yeah.
We can't just go in and edit files on the production server anymore.
Trying to get to prod, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
you shouldn't even be allowed.
I mean, like, they got, like, imagine it, right? I got a bug in my app in production, so I need to build my app and test it in dev and test and through staging and then get to production. But I like, literally this happened to people, and myself included.
Things are broken in between, and suddenly you can't get there.
Right?
And
you have a bug in some code in an application in production
that might not be so easy to roll back, so you need to roll forward. And
and it's tricky because now you're waiting on other things to get fixed, or it's tricky, right?
So it's all production.
So yes, it's all production. And I've heard, but to be fair though, this is where I do appreciate platform teams who create a platform non-production environment to do their own testing of the platform environment.
You should be doing your own unit and integration testing
in a separate
before you release it, before you unleash it on your customers, right?
In their non-production environments. You need a platform non-production environment. And that's okay.
That's tough. That's just naming that thing can be hard, right? But it's absolutely, and you should have a strategy for rolling out and even canarying changes to the platform and all the build pipeline definitions. And don't change and break everyone at the same time.
Yeah, but for anyone who's a platform leader, I support you in your request for a platform non-production environment that is separate from the application developers' non-production environments. You are not alone. You're allowed one.
Yeah, it's a must-have.
You are allowed it, whatever anyone tells you. And then measure yourself. We talked a lot about measuring yourself. Track user sentiment and set measure and report on your SLI and SLIs, but also measure that sentiment, but the experience, right? We talk about measure the sentiment, but can you measure experience? It's a very qualitative measure. So you have to talk to people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard to put a number on it.
Yeah.
Right. Not even, you can't really put a letter on it either. It's not like A+. But
although there are, you can do some NPS stuff in your surveys and get at least a granular idea of what people are thinking at any given time, right?
I'm not a great researcher in this space, but I think at least you know if you're doing really bad or quite good or very good. All right.
Quite good.
I know.
Oh.
Yeah, we shall not use that. We shall not use that word, that
very
expression.
Good. Very good.
Very good. Or good.
Quite good, good, very good, as you taught me.
Yes. If you're in Britain, don't report quite good. It's ambiguous.
You know what I love about this this summary slide? We did not look at it beforehand, and we hit all of this very
I
naturally.
know.
It like
We talk
you would
about these
think
things.
that we had, you know, planned to have this be all of our topics, and it just sort of happened that way.
But
I mean, we
it's
had
not.
our slide, you know, we had some stuff from our slides, but you know,
I
these
think we have
specific
talked about
things,
this so much, Dave.
yeah,
Clearly.
it's easy.
I think we spent so many hours talking about these topics together that clearly we are aligned on what's important to
Yes.
us.
Yes.
This is, yeah, I said, it's so nice to have these chats with you, and it's nice to see people joining us live on LinkedIn. Didn't get any questions or comments today, but I have seen that people have been coming and going watching this live. So it's really nice to see that we've had some live viewers today. And if you are watching the recording and you want to drop in questions, we do come back and answer them. So don't hesitate to do that. And
And follow Build to Boom.
yes, follow our page because we're so close to 150 followers, so we can do our live series going forward on there. So next time will be the last of this particular series. In the future, we will be doing more live conversations with guests on topics related to platform adoption with other people from the industry, and sometimes just me and Dave diving further into platform adoption topics. But next time, we will continue with our last in the series. So it does not end here, does it? Because
Nope.
it's a circle and it doesn't finish. So we got to finish it because we got to loop back. So next time we're going to talk about
the
looping
loop.
back. Yeah,
That's going
and
to be
how
great.
we loop back.
Ties it together.
Ties together. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we'll see you all next time. We'll publish the date, and you all have a good rest of your Friday and have a good weekend.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.